Welcome, everybody, to Write Out Loud, the podcast about storytelling, authorship, writing, and all of those types of arts. The things that we hold near and dear to our hearts, at least. I am here, of course, with the lovely, amazing...
You're running out of adjectives. You're running out of adjectives. I knew there would come a point.
There's always got to be a blooper reel, right? Okay. Welcome, everybody, to Write Out Loud, the podcast about storytelling, writing, authorship, and the arts that we hold dear to our hearts. I am here joined by, of course, the magical, mystical, wonderful, amazing, and effervescent Tina.
Hello.
Hello. And we are joined by a very, very special guest. We are joined by Tom Colgan with Berkeley Publishing and Penguin Random House. Tom, hello.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Doing Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. We're very excited to have you here. Now, if you're wondering, who is Tom Colgan? What does he do? We've already said he works for Berkeley and for Penguin Random House, right? But Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself and sort of the role that you play at Berkeley and at Penguin Random House.
So Berkeley is an imprint of Penguin Random House. We are a commercial fiction part of the company. I am an editorial director, which means that I supervise a group of editors. We have 3 editorial directors. We each handle different aspects of the list. I handle science fiction, fantasy, and mystery and thrillers. Cindy Huang does romance, which is a huge part of the list. So, I mean, it sounds like I'm doing a little more than she, but it's not at all. I'm a much smaller part. Cindy does romance, and Amanda Bergeron does book club fiction and just general fiction, which is also another huge part of the list. I clearly have the smallest part of the list. And then all 3 of us report to our wonderful boss, Claire Zion, who's the editor-in-chief. And I have been there. Just background very quick. I started there at a school in 1985. When I got out of school, I started working at Berkeley, and I worked there for 5 years. Then I went to Avon for 6 years, and I've been back since 96. And January, if you can do the math, even though we're in publishing, we can do enough math to know that starting work in January 85 means that this coming January 2025 will be my 40th year, my 40th anniversary in publishing. Yeah.
Fantastic.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Oh my gosh. And we were talking a little bit before we kicked things off that you've worked with some very large names in the industry. We're talking Tom Clancy, we're talking Lee Child, we're talking Janet Evanovich. While we're name dropping, any other names you want to throw on that pile?
We'd love to drop a million names. Mark Grady, Don Bentley, Laura Childs, who does the T-Shop Mysteries. I'm sure I could think of a million other people. Ed McBain at one point, way in the distant past. He was a great guy. Salvatore Lambino was his real name. He said, very interesting because so he wrote under Ed McBain. His legal name was Evan Hunter, so people called him Evan, but he had been born with the name Salvatore Lambino, and he changed it to Evan. When he started writing, he changed it to Evan Hunter. And he told me, I remember being at, I think it was an ABA, not ABA, yeah, it was an ABA at the time. But remember, BEA was ABA back in the day. And he said, do you know what my real name is? And I was like, Evan Hunter. And he goes, no, it's Salvatore Lambino. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. So anyway, I told you that I go off on these crazy tangents that have nothing to do with anything.
That's okay. That's a very interesting tangent. I mean, I have a million questions like, why did he change his name? What motivated him? And I think I've read some Ed McBain from back in my bookseller days. There was another bookseller there that just loved his stuff. So yeah, that's a familiar name. Great.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's a really good story. I love hearing kind of those. So what would you say has probably been the most memorable interaction or the most memorable kind of work that you've done with any one of those authors?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm very proud of the fact that I did 2 books with Janet. She's lovely. And
Mhm.
I got 1 joke in each book. And I was like,
Oh, nice.
Nice.
I'm done here. I was like, if you can get Janet Evanovich to like a joke of yours enough to put it in her book, like what more could you
Yeah,
ask for? So I was
that's
like,
Oh,
great.
you know,
yes.
I don't even remember what the second one was, but one was somebody was going to the mall. They were going to go mall walking or something. And I said, wouldn't it be funnier if they were going to Cinnabon? And she said, yes, that would be funnier. And
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
wow, that's my big
So
moment.
this is so
That's
interesting
incredible.
too. Yeah. It makes you wonder, like, everyday occurrences for writers tend to make it into the stories. So I
Yep.
bet you see a lot of finished products that you can see little bits of not just your jokes, but other interactions that you may have had, or maybe interactions,
Oh,
that you've had with other people too. Um,
you mean like interactions that the author had with me directly?
Yeah, either you directly. I mean, it's just fascinating that they can take from everyday life. Like, she
Oh,
liked your
yeah.
joke well enough, or like, oh yeah, that's the Cinnabon. That's better. That's
A,
great.
suc- a successful author is a sponge. I mean, this is what
Yes.
they're when they're out in public, they're absorbing how this person talks and they're listening to what is happening over here and they're absorbing all this stuff. And I've never,
Yeah.
ever had an author who wasn't, saying to me, either sending me or saying to me, like, hey, did you see this really interesting article and whatever about this thing? Or, I mean, they're always taking the stuff in because that's what, then they twist it around, tie it up, and put it back out again. And that's
Sure.
the
Yeah.
brilliant, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Well, I can think
Yeah.
of it too as a situation where maybe you're out, maybe at a meeting for coffee or something like that, and something happens in the cafe that that both of you find kind of interesting, or just
Yep.
like, oh wow, that was weird, right? And then that somehow ends up in a story or
Like
some version of that event, right?
they're interested in how things work. I think and I mean, honestly, I mean this for any author. I mean, you might not ever think like I'm going to write a book set in a Starbucks, but you go into Starbucks and you're thinking like, okay, so this is interesting. This person takes the order and then they like enter it here and it goes there. And they're just sort of cataloging like how this stuff happens. And it
Sure.
may never make its way into print, but it's just interesting. So they're always looking to see how things work in other industries. And I mean, that's what I love about them. The thing I love about authors is their inquisitiveness.
Yeah. Their
Oh, that's
curiosity.
fantastic.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, I love that. And we had really brought you in as well to talk a little bit about something special that Berkeley is doing.
Yep.
Tina, why don't you kick us off down this path?
Yeah, I actually heard through the grapevine. It's not something I had kept up with personally, but when someone told me about it, I passed it on to my clients. And in fact, one of my clients actually prepared to actually submit and didn't meet the deadline, but she's ready for the next one if there is one. But please talk a little bit about what you guys are calling open submissions. It was something you initially did, I think you said December of 23, and then you did it again
21
in May.
this year.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So back in the day, so when I started in the business, there was always something called the slush pile, right? And it was something that was, I think the adjective dreaded was always attached to it, to be honest with you, because it was stuff that came in. Neither of you are as old as I am, but maybe you'll at least know the phrase over the transom. I think some of my younger colleagues would say, like, what in God's name is a transom? But the stuff would come over the transom and it was physical because all our submissions were physical. And they would go into, usually most places had a room or a closet or something where they kept them. And then there were various ways of doing it. And at Avon, the assistants would get together once a month and go through them and see if there's anything there. Other places, Berkeley, when I first started, there was an editor that they paid to come in at nights. She came in at night and read the slush submissions. And then times changed and everything became electronic and all our submissions are electronic. I mean, I don't want to be mean, but like if you tried to send like a paper submission now, I think I don't know what we freak out. Like, what are we doing this thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we didn't get as many. I mean, you would think you would get a lot, but no one's really excited about opening up an email from someone they don't know. So it sort of petered out. But then tragically came the murder of George Floyd. And everyone was sort of thinking, like, well, what can we do before then, Penguin Random House had been very committed to DEI initiatives, and they were asking each imprint, or not just each imprint, but each department, like, what are you going to do as a DEI initiative?
Why don't you explain what DEI is, just in case there are people out there that aren't familiar with that acronym?
So it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's a way that we looked at ourselves and said, we are not as open as we think we are. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. And it was I think it's the best thing that happened to publishing in the last 10 years, to be honest with you. I really do. Because it really changed the way we looked at things. It really changed the ways we looked at ourselves. I think everybody felt before then, if you had spoken to them, everyone would have been like, I'm open. I'll read anything. Someone sends me something, I'll read it. I don't even know the color of their skin when they send it to me. Of course you don't. But the question was, well, are you just sitting there waiting for it, or you're looking for it? And we weren't really looking for it. We were just sitting there waiting for it. And this is one of the issues that came up when we started looking into what we as Berkeley editors could do in terms of DEI. And one of the things that authors of color would say is, we don't have the entree that other people do. Like, and here's a perfect example. I'm in this job because I went to college with somebody who had a job at Berkeley. And when I graduated in January 85, save up if you want to send me a 40th anniversary present in a couple months. And when I graduated from school, my friend Joanne said, hey, there's this position for an assistant open. Do you want to apply? And I applied, and here I am. But a lot of those people would say, well, I didn't have that friend who could make that connection for me. And the same thing when it came to writers. They didn't have that friend who was published who could introduce them to their agent, or they didn't know anybody, published author, who could introduce them to their publisher. So it was getting over that first hurdle was keeping a lot of people from connecting with publishers. So we thought the best way to eliminate that hurdle was to open up to direct submissions. So basically, I don't want to say slush because that has a negative connotation, but direct, submission. So we did it. We did it in December 21. And what we committed to was that every one of these submissions was going to be read by a Berkeley editor.
Wow.
We weren't going to bring in, we weren't cheat and bring in that person who came in at night and looked at them. We were all going to look at them, and we were feeling pretty good about it. And then we got 5,293. And we
Whoa. Wow.
That's wow. So the best laid plans, so it took us a while. And understandably, I think a lot of the people that submitted were kind of feeling like, hey, I haven't heard anything, but we're like, hang in there. We're getting to you. And we did.
Yeah.
And most importantly, we ended up buying 4 books out of that list.
Wow.
So 4 new authors, all debut authors. And when in each case, we said to them, okay, we want to buy your book, but before we buy your book, do you want to go out and get an agent? You don't have to do it. We're not telling you to do it. We're not telling you not to do it. But do you want to get an agent? And all 4 of them went out and got agents, which is easier to do, obviously, when you have a deal in hand.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and we are just about to publish the first one in October. And then we have what is the next one? Oh, we have one in October, one in November, one in January, and one not till the end of next year. But we're very proud of them. We're very excited to have these new authors on our list. And we got through all 5,293 of them. And then we had a second round, which started, as you said, in May of this year. And we got 3,100. We had decided we'd left it open too long the first time around. That's why we ended up with 5,200. This time around, we cut it down to just 2 days, or maybe it was 3 days, or
Yeah.
whatever. And we got 3,000, which is still,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, we learned
That's
our lesson,
incredible.
and we're going at it methodically. And I'm happy to say we're 25% of the way through them. And we're going to get through every one and get back to the people. And hopefully we have yet to buy one from this list, but it's only been since May. So we're hopeful
Yeah.
that we'll get at least 4 out of this too.
So was that when you said you were looking to get back to all of them? Like, initially I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to ask this, because with that many submissions, especially in the first batch, right? Like I was like, there's no way they're going to get back to every single one. But I mean, you're giving feedback directly to every single submission?
Well, we're using Query. Do you know Query Manager? So Query Manager is a tool that's used by students. It's really great. And it's really kind of automated. So if you say no, it just sends out like a little, like you don't have to write a whole thing to people. You just say like, no, we don't want this. And it sends a little thing back to them saying like, thanks a lot, but this isn't right for a list. Actually, I don't really know the exact wording, but it's something like that. And then, but if you want it, what we do is then in that instance, it'll send an email back to the person that you can edit and say, hey, it's me. And I've done this already this year. Hey, it's me. I'm here. I'd love to read it. Here's my direct work email. Send it to me. And then after that, we just consider it a submission. So it's out of the, so we've answered one way or the other. Either we've answered, it comes out of the group. So either it comes out because I'm now dealing with it as a submission, or it comes out because we've rejected it. So, and then also, honestly, people will write to us and say, hey, while you were considering this, I got an offer from this other publisher, or I got an offer from, a lot of people will say they get agents. They'll say like, hey, I've got an offer of representation from an agent. And in that case, we almost always say like, well, then go get the agent and just come to us. You really don't, we really want people to be agented. It really is their interest, our interest for them to be agented. So we don't want to try to like snake them by saying like, well, quick, we'll make you an offer before you can like sign with that agent. Nobody wants that. That in the long run, that just leaves a bad taste in everybody's mouth. So
sure. Are there any submissions that you didn't accept that maybe you're still kind of like, man, that story's still sticking with me, or maybe even thinking, gosh, I hope they fix some stuff and send it back in, or, anything like.
Yes, some people, and in fact, a lot of people do get back to people and say sort of that middle ground. You're right. I'm glad you brought that up. Say that middle ground. They'll write back and say, I really liked your submission, but I really think, I don't know,
it needs a little work.
You said World War I, or it should be whatever. You think of, how do you feel about that? And in some cases, I know people have had phone calls with authors and sort of pushed out with them, like, here's what I was thinking. What do you think about that? And I mean, to be honest with you, most of these are debut authors, so they're pretty amenable. It's worked out. I think some of the ones that we bought had some, well, I mean, everything has changes, everything has editing.
Oh yeah.
But I think at least one of them had some like major change, where originally they contacted the author and said, hey, we think you should do this. Said, that's a really interesting idea. I'll try it. And then we bought the revised version.
That's just this program to me. I mean, I've been in this industry in one way or another since I was in my early 20s. So we're working on 30 years here. And the way that you guys are working this is just, I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, it's such an opportunity because, as you said, not a lot of people have easy access to the New York publishers. And even prior to ebooks and self-publishing, it was a difficult landscape. But this is just such an easy way for people to submit and stuff. So I'm blown away by the program. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on.
I mean, one of the things we kind of try to remind ourselves of all the time, I mean, I think this happens in any business, is that it becomes just, you understand it so well that you think like, well, what's the big mystery? And yet whenever I talk to writers groups, that's like one of the first things they'll say to me is like, it's just all a mystery. It's all like, how does any of this stuff happen? And what's the secret? And I would say, well, there's no secret, but like, I guess there kind of is a secret because you have to know how to get that thing on my desk in the first place. And that's why when we looked at this, we thought like, this is the way to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know you had talked about like this really was born out of DEI focus, right? And in all of the submissions, let's say even the first round with 5,200 some submissions, what was the breakdown? Was there a way that you guys were maybe looking at tracking that type of demographic information for that, or anything
No.
in that area?
No, okay. There's really no way to do that. No, I think legal way to do that, or no way moral or ethical either. I mean,
sure.
We just said like, hey, we did advertise. We tried to advertise, not advertise, but like inform BIPOC writers groups. This was going to happen, but we told other groups too. I mean, we didn't exclude non-BIPOC groups, but we like specifically went out and told them, hey, this is going to happen. But once the manuscripts came in, we had no idea what the background of I mean, they have to put a little bio in there, but that's up to them what they want to include, what they don't want to include. So we would just, and I think the essence of, I mean, I might be saying this wrong. I might get in trouble. I think it seems to me that the essence of DEI is to be open to new things, but always keep your standards up. So we were open to the best books. We feel like these are the 4 best books in that group. And they're great.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's more about giving opportunities where there aren't for them to step up, but they still have to step up and produce that work, which there are plenty of people out there that can, like you said, you had 5,200 submissions. So, and people have to be very, very courageous to actually submit. I think that's something too that our listeners are probably like, oh man, would I even have the guts to submit? I mean, like I said, I'm thinking of my own clients that I did have one, and I didn't think she was going to be ready because I've been working with her. We're on book number 4 or 5, and she absolutely wanted to pitch New York. So that's what we've been focused on, but she was not ready. She was too scared. She's like, when I talked to her about, hey, is it time to start looking for agent? She kind of steps back and was like, I don't know if I'm ready. So I actually passed her the information for the May open submission, thinking that this would kind of maybe get her interested if perhaps there was another one later on. Because as you said, it was only open for a couple days. But man, she went for it. She absolutely went for it. Now, again, she didn't make the submission because I think she wasn't quite ready. And we were working together on what she was going to send to you guys. And I think ultimately she said, you know what? I'd like a little more time to work on this stuff. But it's amazing to me that you guys give this opportunity. Is there anything about the program or the submissions that surprised you?
Well, what clearly surprised us was the enthusiasm. I mean, we did not.
Sure.
Numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't expect 5,200, 5,300 practically the first time around. We just were blown away by that. And honestly, to be perfectly honest, the second time around was kind of we tried to, it didn't go that smoothly because we tried to say like, hey, we'll only take 1,000, but that exploded Query Matcher. The first day, people within the first hour, it had crashed Query Matcher. So we had to like work out something else where we only open for a couple of days. And the other thing, the guy who runs Query Matcher had a very smart idea. He said, don't tell people, okay, next Tuesday it opens at 8:00, because at 8:00 on Tuesday, no matter what you do, you're going to get a gazillion submissions. He said, wait till Tuesday at 10:00 and say, okay, Query Matcher is now open. It'll be open for like 24 hours or 2 days. So word will get out, but you won't get that huge rush all at once. And that really made it true.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was what really surprised us, was the huge response we got. And on behalf of my fellow editors, I know they feel this way too. We do apologize to the people, certainly in the first group, because we did not think it would take that long to get back to them. And the other thing, honestly, all right, this is gloves off. The other thing was the quality. Like, I was looking at this like Slush. And one of the things when you go back to Slush was, it was brutally, some of it was terrible. So you really went into this thinking like, oh, I could do 5 in an hour because 3 of them will be awful. And I'll just read 5 lines and reject. And that really was not the case. So that's good and bad. I mean, it's great that there's so many good writers working out there and that they're sending it to us, but it also slows you down because you just can't get rid of like something that you expected was going to be really terrible. So those are the 2 things that surprised us: the quality and the number of submissions we got.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. And I think you think about all of the people that put their hat in the ring, and Tina, you talked about even like your client wanted to, but wasn't quite there. And just the amount of courage it takes to do that, to submit, right? I mean, I have friends who will procrastinate their way out of submitting to a contest because they're just like too afraid of it. Like they're afraid of the rejection, right? But they're kind of rejecting themselves out of hand anyway, because they didn't submit it. But anyway, so it's interesting. It's very courageous to see that many people stepped up and said, like, here's my work and please judge it, right? Like you're handing it to somebody to say, please, deem this good or bad.
I mean, I would say, this is easy for me to say. I know that if I were writing and I sent it in and I was rejected, all I would see would be the rejection. No, we're not judging it. What we're saying is this is something that would work for our list. There are many, many things that I really like to read that just are not like the sort of thing we would do. So, and we don't get into that in the reject. We just say, thanks for writing this. This isn't right for our list. But, most of the time we do mean that, like not this is bad or the dialogue's stinky or whatever. We just mean this is not something that we feel like we could publish successfully. It's just not our jam. So I just want to say that we're not judging. Now, again, if I were a writer and I was at home and I got a reject, I would feel judged without a doubt.
Yes. But something that I tell writers groups all the time, that a rejection from a traditionally published editor, or even just an editor that's freelance that says this isn't for me, what they're really saying isn't that you're terrible and you won't work somewhere else. It's just, we're not a good fit. They're actually telling you that they're not going to be able to get behind the work. I know I have a little bit more insight into traditional publishing just because of my previous jobs, that you guys need to be excited about taking somebody on, because you're in those marketing meetings, you're in the all different sorts of meetings, fighting for space at a bookstore, fighting for marketing dollars, doing all those things. So you really want somebody who is going to be a champion of your work. And all a rejection is saying is, I don't think I can be your champion. There might be one out there for them, but it's not a good fit for me. So I see it a little bit differently because I know what you guys do in the background. So,
you kind of have to look at it like, I think, dating in a way, right? Like, you might get rejected, and listen, you could be the most luscious peach there is, and somebody isn't going to like peaches. That's okay.
Yep.
That's okay, right? Like it's a better fit for somebody else. That's fine.
But there is somebody out there.
Hurt the heart.
There is somebody out there that loves peaches. You just have to find the right one.
Yep. You'll find them. It'll be fine. Don't you worry.
So Tom, with the success of these last 2 open submissions, what are your plans for possible another one?
So right now, as I said, we're 25% of the way through the 3,000 we have now. Our commitment is to get back to all of those people. So we're not even going to think about doing another one until we've handled all these submissions, because it wouldn't be fair to the people that we're dealing with now if we started to talk about like doing it. It wouldn't feel right, because if you're sitting at home and you sent this to us in May already, it's been, I mean, I said 25%, but it's been, I have to do it with my fingers, June, July. What a professional I am.
Oh no, I tell people all the time, I work in words, not numbers. I work in words, not numbers.
So you're thinking like, oh, I haven't heard from them. Does this mean they hate me? Does this mean that whatever? And then if I were to say to you like, hey folks, don't worry, in a couple months we're going to be, how would you feel? Like, I'm already talking to new people. I should finish up with you before I start talking about it. So anyway, long story short, we need to finish these 3,000 submissions, which we're going to do as expeditiously as possible before we start talking about doing more.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. That's really awesome. So as we start to kind of bring things to a close, Tom, I've got one kind of question for you.
Shoot.
Dear listener here might be thinking about submitting a book or submitting a manuscript, right? And is maybe even just embarking on their writing journey.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, what is probably the most solid piece of wisdom that you would give them?
Oh, can I give them many pieces of wisdom?
Sure. Go for it.
So my first piece of wisdom is recognize that you're writing because you have a story that you have to tell. So it's your story, and I don't mean a memoir. I'm just saying it's the story you want to tell, and you should tell that story. You should not, when I go to a writer's conference, I always say to people in a very polite way, you can ask me any question except what's selling, because that is the absolute 100% wrong question. And I'll tell you why, because you're going to come to me and say, what's selling? And I'm going to say, romanticy is hot as blazes. And you're going to say, I don't know anything about romanticy, but all right, I'll go home, meet some romanticies, write them up. I'll meet you here next year. And you come back with your romanticy. And I say to you, oh, we killed that golden goose. We beat it to death
Yes.
months ago, and we're on to something else now. That is a terrible mistake. You really should not write to the market. You should write because you have to write. You have to tell your story. So tell your story and write it the best way you can. And the other piece of advice is that the one rule of writing is that good writing beats everything. Like the only rule of writing is good writing beats everything. You could write a book with if you're a good enough writer, you could write a book with zero dialogue and people would be compelled by it. You could write a book that was all dialogue and people would be compelled. And you could write a book. What was that book the guy wrote had no E's in it? I've never read it, but
yes.
Yeah. The letter E did not appear in it. I mean, I don't know about the book. Maybe it was terrible. Maybe it was great. I don't know. But I'm just saying that you can do anything if you're a good enough writer. That doesn't mean that the average person is a good enough writer. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
good writing trumps everything. And then from a practical point of view, well, the other thing, let me just go back to the other thing, what I was saying to you guys earlier before we started recording. This is the best time of all to be an author, because you can be published by a big 5 publisher. You can be published by a small publisher. You could be self-published. You can be published by Kindle Unlimited. You can be published any one of these other platforms. You can do it yourself. You can do part of it yourself and do part of it with somebody else. And we were talking about I was fascinated by the guy you had on who was writing in somebody else's universe. I thought that was amazing. I mean, 40 years ago when I started, you could do any of those things. You were published by a publisher, period, end of story. Maybe you could print the book yourself and sell it out of the trunk of your car but I mean, that was almost impossible. I mean, you could, but it was, so you just have so many options today. If you do want to be published by a big 5 publisher or even a small publisher, I think you really need to get an agent. I would get as I said, 40 years in the business. If I wrote a book tomorrow, which will not happen, I would get an agent, because an agent really will explain the lay of the land to you. We'll know where to send it. We'll know what to do with it. I think you really need to get an agent, and then just good luck and just write what you want to write. And at the end of the day, if all else fails, you'll have a book that you're proud of and your grandkids can read it. And when my father-in-law died, we found out that he had been taking a creative writing course, which we didn't know. And we found this novels, a story that he had written about an adventure he had where he was sailing in the book. We were like, oh my gosh, we didn't know this. It was amazing. It was well written. It was really interesting. So, I mean, so that leads to the last piece of advice. Don't do this for the money. Because you think this is a path to fame and fortune. You are making a sad, sad mistake, my friend. That's the one thing that I would absolutely say.
Yeah.
1% of authors end up being that fame and fortune.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's interesting that you say that, because when I first started my book matchmaker business, being an author coach, an editor, one of the things I really wanted to do was dive into where they needed the help the most. And so I did all these free 30-minute jam sessions where I would give them advice and consulting and stuff. And there was a theme. And that theme was, I'm not selling. And once we got into why they weren't selling, every single one had written some genre that they did not like.
Really?
Yes.
Ew.
And it shocked me. It shocked me because everyone was, as you said, chasing the market. But two things were happening. Number one, I think they were too late on whatever it was. The other thing was, if you don't have a love of what you're doing and what you're writing, I do think that comes out in your work.
100%.
And I think you struggle. I think your heart's just not in it.
Yep.
So I think your advice of love what you're writing, love what you do, be happy, because that was the other thing that I recognized in all of those people. None of them were happy. Not one were happy. And it didn't matter how much they were making. They could have been making $1 million and they weren't going to be happy because they weren't.
What's crazy is people think this is an easy way to make a living. And it's a terribly, terribly hard way to make a living. If you're unhappy doing this, paint houses. I mean, at least you get money. You'll be unhappy doing that, but at least there'll be definitive results and you'll get money. Or just as hard doing this, and you could get nothing out of it if you're, as you said, chasing the market. So think a ditch or something. Also, when you're this to somebody listening, I said, like, when you're a ditch digger, at least there's somebody next to you who can complain to, and like, oh man, it's hot out here. This ditch stinks. I hate this job. And he's saying the same thing. When you're an author, you have all those feelings, but you're just at home by yourself. So oh my gosh, sure we're painting.
No, it's all to emphasize that you really need to love the genre that you're going to write, the story that you're going to write. As you said, write something you love.
Yes.
I think that is just on point advice. I don't think we'd ever find any better advice than that, really.
Agreed.
So I do have one additional question before we close out, because I know every editor wants to talk about a couple of authors or a couple of books that you're really excited about that are coming out maybe this fall or winter.
Okay. I'm always excited about my authors. Mark Rainey has a new Gray Man book coming out called Midnight Black in February. I love Mark as one of my best friends and just a great author. Always excited to be working with him. I continue to do the Clancy books, the Clancy series. And recently, this year, for the first time ever, so there's two series. There's the Jack Ryan Jr. series and the Jack Ryan Sr. series. And this year we had to replace both sets of authors, which we'd never had to do before at the same time. And I'm really pleased with the results because Andrews and Wilson, Brian Andrews and Jeff Wilson, who go by Andrews and Wilson, took over the Jack Sr. series. And they did a book called Act of Desperation, which we just published Act of Defiance. Always call it the Act of Desperation. Act of Defiance, which we just published a couple months ago. Hugely successful. People love it. And tomorrow, Tom Clancy, not Secret State, what's it called? Well, there's another one coming tomorrow from Mike Woodward. That's the Jack Ryan Jr. series. And I'm super excited about that. If I could remember the title, I'd be even more excited. I have, what do I have coming in the fall? I have, next year, I have a book that I'm really excited about because it's a new kind of mystery for me. It's not a cozy exactly. It's sort of, and it's not dark. It's like we call the sort of a found family. It's about, it's called The World's Greatest Detective and Her Just Okay Assistant. And I love it. I agonized over this title for the longest time. And I said, and my assistant is brilliant. And I said, how about The World's Greatest Detective and Her Assistant? And she said, how about The World's Greatest Detective and Her Just Okay Assistant? And I was like, that's 100 times better.
Yes.
That is fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
oh my God.
We have that coming in the winter. I was super excited about that. And I just signed a guy named Ryan Pote, who's a brand new thriller author. He wrote a book called Blood and Treasure, which we are publishing in the spring of next year. And I'm really excited to introduce him to the world. And today, I shouldn't say this. So sadly, I was publishing Ted Bell. Sadly, Ted Bell passed away. And Ryan Stack, who's a great author and a great guy, has taken over the series and is doing the first of the new Alex Hawke books called Monarch. And it's coming in March of next year. And today, I'm sitting in my office and my phone rings and it says James Patterson. And I was like, could it be a different James Patterson? So I picked the phone and this very nice man says, "Hey, is this Tom?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "This is James Patterson. How are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm fine." And he said, no, I knew he was looking at the book. I mean, it wasn't like totally out of the blue. I mean, we had sent him the book for a quote. So, I mean, it wasn't like just the blue James Patterson called me, but I mean, James Patterson's never called me before. So the part is he goes, "Hey, I read the book this weekend. It was great. I'm super excited about it. I'd love to give you a quote, but my assistant's on vacation and could I just dictate it to you?" And I was like, okay, my steno is not really up to speed, so you might have to go a little slow. I mean, I couldn't say no, but on the other hand, I was like, how am I going to write fast enough? And you don't want to see fast enough. Whoa, down.
Yeah.
Right.
He gave me a stellar quote, wrote it all down, and then chatted with him for a little while. He's super, super, super nice guy. I mean, I have some authors that I know that work with him. We talked about that. He really, I couldn't tell you how nice a guy he was. But meanwhile, I'm thinking, I couldn't even read my handwriting. I'm like, I've got to get a typewriter and start typing this up before I forget what he said. So I typed it up, and the joke's going to be that the managing editors are always like, okay, where did this quote come from? Can you like show me the magazine it came from? Or can you show me like the email you got with this thing? And now I'm going to have to be like, well, James Patterson up and I wrote it down.
Oh my God.
Well,
oh my gosh. That's just,
I mean, look at this face. Would this put him line? Of course, I'm telling the truth.
That's amazing, though.
It's going to be like a little bit of an out of body experience of like, I have James Patterson on the phone and he's giving me a quote for this author I'm really excited about. And oh my gosh, now I got to make sure I get every word down. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
What a day.
So, yep. There's always something happening. Every day something new happens.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Tom, thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you.
For the generosity you've showed with your time. And we very much appreciate it. We've enjoyed having you on. And I don't know if there's any kind of final thought you want to throw out there before we should just say good night.
No, just thank you for having me. This is a great podcast. I'm going to go back and listen to some more of them, listening in the car and learning a lot about the part of publishing that I don't know. I know the big five part of publishing, but as I said, we keep talking about this other part. I really don't know. I mean, I know people do it, but I don't know all that much about it. So I'm finding it really fascinating to hear about it.
Oh, what a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, it's huge. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, as always, for listening. We very much appreciate your time and generosity with your time as well. So with that, we will bid you adieu. So good night and thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. We really hope that you're enjoying every bit of it, but we would love to hear your feedback. Drop us an email either to matt@writeoutloudpod.com or Christina@bookmatchmaker.com. We would love to hear your thoughts. What's working, what's not working, and what do you want to hear more of? Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.